Hi, my name is Eric Boxley, and I'm one of the counselors here at Cienega High School. And today I'm going to talk with you about mental health awareness and suicide prevention. And I know that this may not have been the first video that you clicked on, but in many ways, I'm thinking it might be the most important. And I know that mental health and suicide is not something that we like to talk about a lot, but I'm hoping that you'll stay with me through this presentation. I think that there's some information in here that you might uh, be willing to use, and it might be useful. So I have a story to kind of illustrate that. And the story is this. I do this presentation every year. And when I was first doing it, uh, some years after that initial presentation, a parent came up to me and he was very thankful. And he said, "Thank you for doing what you do. I really appreciate it." He goes, "I was one of the parents that has had to deal with suicide." And I said, we had a conversation, and I was like, "I'm so sorry about that." And he said, "Well, it's interesting because I was sitting in your presentation at the time and I was thinking, man, this is very interesting. I'm glad we're doing this, but I'm also glad that I don't have to worry about this. My daughter uh, does well in school. She has great friends. She's excelling at extracurricular activities. She's got so many things going for her. And um, and I was just feeling like, man, I'm just glad I don't have to deal with that. But I did have to deal with it. And when it came time for me to deal with it, I felt much better prepared after having talked with you, and it made me feel more comfortable. And I just want to kind of pass on that story because it is very likely that your child is going to have some sort of experience with mental health or suicide throughout their time here at Cienega and in high school. And we just want them to be prepared for it, and we want them to know what to do. Um, and we're hoping that we can kind of provide some insights with you as well and how to handle that. So I'm hoping you'll stay with me. I think we'll have at least a little bit of fun. Now, again, my name is Eric Boxley. I have the counselor's caseload A through C, and this is a very interesting year for me. Not only is it my 15th year here, but my oldest daughter is in this class, and I've been waiting for this class for a long time. And so I'm really excited. And I know this is going to be a weird year, but we're going to make the best of it, and I'm excited for it. So one of the things you can see is that I'm also the suicide prevention coordinator for the district, and so this is a real passion of mine and a journey that I've been on for quite some time, and I'm happy to share that a little bit with you today. And when I speak today, I'm going to speak on behalf of all of our counselors. We all do such a great job here at Cienega, and I'm very proud of the staff that we have here. A couple of things that we do. The main three things that we do is we work with your student on academics. So that might be schedule changes. It might be learning how to study for a test, things like that. We also work on college and career. Now, as a freshman, they might not be getting ready for their SATs, but we are going to ask that they start thinking about what they want to do. And you might encourage that too. What do you want to do when you grow up? And exploring those careers that they come in contact with and investigating them and trying to find out what they're all about and seeing if they might be a good fit for them. And the third thing is personal and social issues. So we're here to listen to them if they need to talk about friendships, boyfriends, girlfriends, teachers, parents. It just so happens that sometimes they get mad at you. It's weird, but true. And sometimes they just need somebody to listen, and that's what we're here for, is to help them and to counsel them as best that we can. Now, today we're going to talk a little bit about what mental health is. We're going to pick one mental health issue, depression, and address that, and then also talk about suicide and how we might be able to address that through Safe Talk, and some resources that you might find useful as you go through this high school journey. So, what is mental health? It's the emotional and psychological and social well-being of your child. So it pretty much affects everything that they do, think, feel, behave. And so it's a really important piece of their health, and we want to be able to be here to help them through that. The great thing is that if there is some sort of issue with mental health, is that it is treatable, and we want to be able to, help you guys through that as best we can. Now, we're going to take a quick look at depression real quick. And the first thing I wanted to say is that feeling depressed is not depression. So some students will say, oh, I have depression, but really they're just having a bad day. And it's important to know that depression needs to be diagnosed by a doctor. Depression has some longevity to it, so it's being depressed over a period of time, and it also requires significant disruption to your normal life activities. So there is a difference between being sad and being depressed. It's just the same as some students will say, oh, I have anxiety, but really they were just anxious in a moment. And we want to be able to, clearly define that and what that means and looks like, because growing up is going to be uncomfortable. And we just want to be able to help your student feel more comfortable being uncomfortable. And that's just, part of growing up. And 1 in 10 youth are going to experience a major depressive episode. So we know that it happens. Our head isn't in the sand. We want to be able to address it. The other thing is that we know that it's treatable. And by knowing that, that creates a pretty good feeling about moving forward and being able to address it head on. So what are some signs that you might see in your child? If you look at these signs, you might say, oh, that sounds like a normal teenager, and you wouldn't be too far off. The key words here are excessive and change. And anytime a behavior becomes excessive, that should cause some concern. Anytime a student has a change or a significant change, those are some things to be able to look at as well. So it's really about being excessive, and significant change. And then how is that negatively affecting them, those changes and things like that. So those are some things to look at, but every person's going to be a little bit different. And that's the important thing about knowing your child and knowing what they're going through, so that you know exactly how it might be affecting them. The other thing to look at is protective factors. Everyone has protective factors. Everyone has skills in problem solving and conflict resolution, and how strong they are in those, and how strong those connections are. That's one of the things that we're really focused on at Cienega, is connections and making connections with kids, because we know that making those connections helps us to alleviate a lot of issues that can arise. So, other things like having a healthy diet, getting a good amount of sleep, and being physically active, those are all things that can be protective factors. Having a mindset of gratitude, just simply being thankful, can be a really major help. And another thing is what do they think? I think it's really important to ask what their thoughts are about issues, and really be able to listen. How are they feeling about different things? And especially with the way that this pandemic is going, and how they're feeling about that, and being isolated from their friends and not being able to come to school on the first day, and all of those things that has built up to their high school year, um, can be a point of a question or a way to talk, and just really asking direct questions about their lives. And I think that, if you do feel a little uncomfortable, you can, use me as a, use me as a way to uh, get your foot in the door and just say, oh, I heard my counselor say I should ask you how you're doing, and things like that. Could just be an easy way to open the door. But I know that being open can be difficult. But I know that the payoff is worth it in the end, and you might be surprised at what they might say. And I know that at this time in their life, they're like, shoving you away, and they don't want anything to do with you a lot of times, and things like that. And the more that they do that, the more they're really saying, keep trying. I'm glad you're talking to me. I love you. I'll get there in a minute. And I think that's a really important thing to remember, is that they really still need you, and they need you to be a big part in their life. So, what to do about depression? I think we pretty much covered it there, as far as be aware of the signs, recognize those protective factors, and what you can fall back onto if you feel like that your child is struggling a little bit, and then really ask your child how they're doing, and getting to know them, and what they're doing on a daily basis. And if you're concerned about depression, please talk to your primary care physician, talk to your school counselor. We are here to help you, and to help you navigate that. And then the last thing is just, if therapy is needed, being willing to participate, whether that's taking them, setting an appointment. They're still young, and they really still need you in that capacity too. It might be that you sit in on a session or something like that if need be, but just that kind of participation will help. So I wanted to kind of shift gears and pivot to suicide, and how we might be able to imagine a suicide safer community. And I got thrown on this journey almost 15 years ago. And it came about because I was the freshman counselor for almost 10 years. And I started seeing a lot of kids for suicide and self-harm. And the interesting thing is that these kids were all walks of life. They were boys and girls, and they were athletes and non-athletes, and they were affluent, and some from poor communities. And so it really made me really think that man, this is pretty interesting, that this is affecting everyone, and all of us. And so I started to put together some data, and I was like, I want to ask these kids some questions. So I started asking, I put together a survey and asked them multiple questions. One of the questions I asked was, how many of you have had thoughts of harming yourself this year? And this was their freshman year. And the answer was 24% had said they had done that. They had thought of harming themselves. And then I asked, how many of you have harmed yourself on purpose? And 18% self-reported that they had harmed themselves on purpose. And then I asked, how many of you have had thoughts of suicide this past year? And the answer was 22%. And then I asked, how many of you have made an attempt at suicide? And the answer was 12%. Well, I was stunned. I knew I wasn't seeing that many kids about this, which concerned me. And so as I kind of started down this path a little bit, I also realized that these numbers were very identical to the national numbers. So Cienega was no different than anyone else. And so that kind of led me to this journey, which was to try to create a suicide safer community. And I came across a program called Safe Talk. And I felt like it really embodied what we were trying to do. And so I trained our staff in Safe Talk. And Safe Talk is simply how to identify people who might be thinking about suicide and then connect them to somebody who can help them. And we as counselors started seeing more and more students for these issues because we had staff members on our campus who were identifying them and getting them to us. And that was really important process. Now, another thing about those numbers are really consistent within 1 or 2 percentage points over 10 years. So it was pretty stable about the number of kids that were thinking about suicide and were wanting to make attempts. So this was not something that was just a kind of off of the grid sort of year or something like this. This was something that was being pretty consistent. So I came across this program, and like I said, we gave it to the teachers. What's really cool is that we have trained all of our teachers, K through 12, in the whole district, and that has been a really cool thing. So I've really enjoyed doing that with and for all of our staff. And now we've started to do it over the last handful of years with our students. And right now they have when they come to Cienega, they have a 4-year plan that every year they're going to have some sort of lesson or training. They will get the full training their sophomore year, but they'll have some sort of lesson about suicide prevention every single year of high school. And so we've placed that a good amount of importance on that. And we just want to create a culture where it's okay to talk about mental health and suicide, and in this stigma of you can do it on your own and just pull yourself up by your bootstraps, but that we're there to listen and that we make it easy for those who need help to ask for it. Now, Safe Talk is very similar to CPR. I kind of liken it to mental health first aid, actually. And the idea is that you have all these people out here who might be thinking about suicide. And we want to put people out there who know how to recognize suicide and be able to connect them to someone who can help them. Just like someone who knows CPR, they can identify somebody who is struggling. They can provide CPR for that person. They're going to call 911. The ambulance is going to come. They're going to take them in the ambulance to the emergency room. There's going to be emergency room staff who's going to take care of them. They might send them up to another floor to have a surgery. After surgery, there's going to be rehabilitation, nurses, doctors, things like that. So there's a whole chain of staff that's there to help when you have a physical health issue. Well, the same is true for mental health. Now, it's not as good, and I believe that our society will be much better off when our mental health care system is on par with our physical health care. And it's not there yet, but things like this training and getting trained in Safe Talk is a good first step. And so we want to be able to kind of create that same sort of system. Now, on our campus, like I said, the counselors are the next level of safety, and we're trained to then be able to make that referral out to the community if we need to. So provide evaluations and interventions for the students. So what is Safe Talk? It's an acronym. I feel like everything is. The first part of talk is to tell. So if somebody's thinking about suicide, they are going to tell us in one way or another. Oftentimes it's not verbally and direct, but most people who are thinking about suicide tell someone in one way or another. And it's up to us to be able to identify that. So one of the actions that we might see from someone is carelessness. So carelessness means two things to me. The first one is care less. They care less about things that they used to care about. So it could be Boy Scouts, or it could be Star Wars memorabilia, or it could be a sport, or it could be church, or it could be anything. But they care less about it now than they used to. And the other is carelessness, recklessness, being dangerous, driving carelessly or recklessly. Those are things that can cause some serious concern. Some others might include being moody, withdrawing from friends and family. A big one is drug and alcohol misuse. It wouldn't be uncommon for some of our students to experiment with drugs and alcohol, but that paints a pretty fine line, because we want to make sure that there isn't any misuse going on here, and that they're using that to escape, or using it to self-medicate. And so those are some things that would cause some real concern for our young students. What you might hear them talk about being alone, but even more so about being lonely. Being lonely is really wanting to be with others and not being able to. And so talking about being lonely. You might hear them talk about being a burden to their parents or to their friends or to other people, not having a purpose, not knowing what they want to do in life, and just wanting to be able to escape the life that they're in. Those are some things that you might hear them talk about. Some feelings that you might sense from them are the feeling of desperation and not knowing what to do, not having the answer, thinking that they've tried everything and nothing's working, to hopelessness, to feeling numb and ashamed. Those are some pretty serious feelings right there that can really inhibit a sense of suicide. And so those are some things to be concerned about if you're starting to sense those feelings. Life situations also play a role, and it's important to be aware of how that might affect someone. So abuse really affects the way that a young person views the world, and so looking out for that, whether that's one of your child's friends or someone else, or maybe they've experienced it themselves or they've seen it. That's a pretty significant life situation. Rejection and loss, and that could be not making the basketball team, a breakup with a boyfriend or girlfriend. It could be the loss of a pet. It could be really anything. And the important thing is how that rejection or loss impacts that person. It may seem not as important to me that they broke up with their girlfriend after only knowing them a month, but it might have a very significant impact on them. So it's important to look at not just what is the rejection or loss, but what it meant to them. And then a suicide experience, whether that's their own experience, whether that's a friend's experience, whether that is someone that they've known in the media, or somebody that they've looked up to, an actor or actress, a musician, anyone that could also impact how they think about suicide. So those are some of the things that they might tell us, some of the things that we might see, hear, sense, or learn about from someone who's thinking about suicide. Now, I wish that I could give you a list and just hand it to you and say, if your child is exhibiting 3 of these things, then they're definitely thinking about suicide and let's get them some help. But it's not quite that easy. And I know that we've talked about some things here in the last few slides, but really we're talking about the person and getting to know them and knowing what they're like and knowing what has changed in their life and knowing what has been excessive in their life and how those things are really impacting them. And I think that that's a really important thing to know, that it's not just a list of things, but it's about really getting to know that person and how it affects them. So what's the next step? If you see some of those things and you're concerned about them, one of the very next steps that you can do is ask. And ask is sometimes a really hard question, especially if you think the answer might be yes. So I want to give you the encouragement to be able to do that. Our training that we have extensively goes into how to ask the question. You're going to do it if you decide to do it. You're going to do it in your own genuine, authentic way. But I do have a scripted way to do it, and it looks something similar to this. Sometimes when people are missing school, not participating in class, and are having trouble at home, they're thinking about suicide. Are you thinking about suicide? You can do that in your own genuine, authentic way. What's really cool about how this question was asked is that at the beginning, it really explains what you've observed and experienced with your child or that person, which is you're letting them know, hey, I've really been looking at you. I've really been paying attention to you. I've really noticed these things. You have told me these things. And then you can ask the question. And it really kind of, in a way, softens the blow. It's a much softer landing. And it makes them feel a little bit more comfortable to be able to really say the truth and what's going on with them. So that might be one way to do that. The next would be, if the answer is yes, or you think the answer is yes, is to then keep them safe and get them to somebody who's available and approachable and able. That's a very important step. Your keep safe connections that you have available to you a lot of times depend on your environment and where you're at. If you're at school, it's certainly your counselor. That's an immediate. We are always available when school's in session. When school's not in session, it becomes a little bit more difficult. One of the places that you can call is 911, and the other, a thing about 911 usually will send out a police officer who's trained in mental health issues, but Palo Verde and the Crisis Center, those are places that are trained only for mental health crisis. So if you can, I would use those first, but 911 is always available no matter what, whenever, and that is sometimes a good and only option. So like I said, the counselors are here to really help, and that's what we're here for. So how can we do that? Well, we can provide brief and short-term therapeutic interventions with students. We are not designed for long-term therapeutic interventions. That's just not how we're set up. We're assist trained, so we can provide those interventions and evaluations and figure out where that student needs to go next. And then, like I said, we do provide the 4-year plan, but we also want to be there to consult with you as parents and advocate for your student on campus. We have a really close relationship with Casa de los Niños, and we can make outside referrals very easily through and with them. And so that's something that we have access to. So there's a lot of really good reasons to be able to consult with your counselor, or even just let them know what's going on, even if you don't want to consult. And we might even be able to provide just some resources or other things, or just advocate for them on campus. So all of those are good things that, and how we might be able to help you. Again, just making sure that you know who your team of counselors are. If the answer is no, or you don't think that your student's thinking about suicide, but or in a crisis, but they might be thinking about suicide, there's lots of community resources. Teen Lifeline is a great one. If texting is more what they're into, there's a texting number here. And then there's a national suicide prevention line that is amazing as well. And then your medical staff is also really important. So what can you do, and next steps that you can do in creating a suicide safer community? And the first one is I would say become attend a safe talk training. We are going to send out some information. If you want to send me your information right now, I can go ahead and put you on a list. Just send me an email and I would love to put you on there. Have discussions about suicide. I know sometimes it's uncomfortable, but sometimes some good things can come out of that. And like I said, reach out to your counselors because we're here. And then if you have any more information that you need regarding suicide, you can get it on the web. Here's a couple of places that you can go. There's lots of information out there, and I don't think you're going to be short on information, but here's a couple. I put the suicide prevention, the national hotline up there. I just really like the logo, and I think it's easy to be able to get to and to put in your phone in your contact list or whatever, and just be able to put it in and go. And I think you could probably in the video get to it really quick if you needed to re-access the video at some point. So I put that up there because it's nice and big and green. And hopefully you can see how creating a suicide safer community is beneficial. And I hope that you will continue to participate, and as your child goes through their high school years, to be able to help them do that as well. And that is the end of my presentation for today. I'm super excited that you guys made it to the end. I'm super excited that you guys are here, and that we're finally starting school. And like I said, I know this is going to be a weird year, but we're going to make the very best of it. We're going to have a great time. And I wish you guys all the best. Take care and have a great rest of your day.